Good evening. This is the Ava Community Energy meeting for the Community Advisory Committee meeting on March 17th. It's about 6 o'clock, 6:05. It's a welcome and roll call, so we should be welcome to your space. So this is your lovely Ava Community Energy space, first time here. Adrian, roll call.
Yes, thank you. Member Landry.
Present.
Member Weiner.
Here.
Member Balkison.
Here.
Member Stevenson.
Here.
Member Swaminathan. Member Lakshman.
We don't need mics, huh?
Member Pacheco. Member Carr. Member Harper.
Present.
Thank you. Member Lutz.
Here.
Vice Chair Souza. And Chair Hernandez.
Present.
I should say that Vice Chair Souza is not at a notice location, but is present in the attendee area.
Thank you. Yeah, she was not.
So she doesn't
Aw.
get the vote.
No,
She's not counted towards quorum or roll
Nikki, hope you feel better.
Is she on the public side?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then we'll call on her. Okay, so the first item of business is our minutes from last month. If you take a second to take a look at those are the minutes from February 18th. Thank you very much, Ava team, for those comments and those minutes. Any questions, corrections, alterations? If not, I make a motion, a second to accept them as is. So moved. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Second. All right, roll call vote?
Thank you. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Weiner.
Yes.
Member Balkison.
Yes.
Member Stevenson.
Yes.
Member Harper.
Yes.
Member Lutz.
Yes.
Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
Thank you very much. Part of my chair report for item number 3. Thank you for those minutes. They always are a good refresher for the board of directors. There at that last meeting of the Ava Board of Directors meeting that occurred in February, they had a swearing in of new members, Hayward, Oakland, San Joaquin County. Our CEO there for Ava reported on the Moss Landing battery fire. The old technology, sharing more information about the Ava portfolio and existing technology, most of which are using new technology for battery storage. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 facilities that uses more of the old facility. There's more information on that presentation from last month's meeting. Ava does have a new CFO, and now Ava also has her first DC fast charging station in downtown Oakland at City Center West Garage. And I think service will be starting for Stockton and Lathrop in April of 2025. During that report by Howard, he provided an update on our discussion highlighting the importance of outreach efforts for Stockton and Lathrop, so making sure there is that opportunity to reach out proportionally to the communities we're serving. There's also the update, this is during my report, excuse me, my CAC report. I was like, what? My apologies, I just wrote it. But we want to make sure I bolster the fact that we want to make sure we get the appropriate level of outreach to areas like Stockton and Lathrop. The Critical Municipal Facilities Program, the importance, and our energy affordability initiatives. Share that the ad hoc committee is focusing on understanding electricity costs, allocating consumer savings, and evaluating Ava's role in regulatory matters with the 2 ad hoc committees for energy affordability and the local development business plan. And finally, share that the members express an interest in ensuring that Ava's repairs understand rate saving options. And thereafter, there was discussion and presentation by Howard again about Ava's rate setting methodology. They shared information on rate setting methodology, historical rates at the board, such as components of Ava's generation rate, PG&E delivery charges, the power charge in different amounts, and also how Ava indexes its rates to PG&E's generation rates, while maintaining a consistent value proposition for consumers that align with market trends on the annual rate setting process and procurement strategy. Some feedback or topics discussed by the board members is the correlation of PCIA and market rates, Ava's exposure to CAISO spot market pricing, the role of resource adequacy in Ava's risk management and procurement strategy, how Ava adjusts its rates in response to PG&E's rate changes, and how to explain rising customer bills despite Ava's discounted rates compared to PG&E. And then thereafter, they provided mid-year budget updates, showing us more favorable and projecting net revenues from $42 million to $95 million.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes, energy costs have gone up, there's lower brown power costs, and the changes in the PCIA help balance the impact. There is concern of financial uncertainty from the CPUC's review of the PCIA calculations that may lead to retroactive charges. And so the board members really want to see a deeper dive into capacity of renewables and carbon-free energy costs, and in a future discussion, whether the 1% uncollectible rate is intentional and how it compares to industry standards, CPUC's review of market price benchmark calculations and the potential financial impact, how partial payments distributed to AVA PG&E, and reserves levels as AVA expands into new businesses, territories. Because we have about $500 million in reserves. So how much, do you want to try and look at 10%, I believe, with that being reserves? That's from memory. And the bigger concern is about the critical municipal facility update. The selected developer has paused due to financial concerns and maybe some of the looming lack of tax benefits that we might receive or other.
Which was this?
The critical municipal facilities program, where you have different cities that are going to engage in clean energy renewable systems. And they even had the RFP out with Greenbridge that was selected to build more energy renewable solutions or projects. But that's shifting and they've paused, and there's discussion by the board and given some direction for AVA to investigate further options to keep those efforts on those projects alive, especially those NEM 2.0 projects. So the staff presented some alternatives, some options, either to forget everything or take it in-house or some kind of combination. So I think the staff is working to streamline and get that going because we look to be online by April of 2026. That's about a year long. And they recently went out with another RFP to get some design build firms to help maybe streamline that process. So
Did they
that's,
explain that last, in our meeting too last?
We should project our voices to make sure that we are heard by,
am I projecting?
I think you
No,
are.
it was me.
We gotta
Yeah.
talk to these green flying saucers.
Yes,
That's, oh,
yes, that's a great idea.
There were efforts, discussions about considering downsizing the project overall, adjusting system designs, or decoupling solar and storage solutions. There could be potential legal consequences if Greenbridge, the developer, withdraws from the project, but nothing was signed, that I understand. There was a lot of discussions, but no formal agreements in place. There's also the element of securing skilled labor and potential partnerships with unions and training programs. But the board directed the executive committee to provide further guidance to staff on next steps before a formal action is brought back in March. So the board is empowering the executive committee to work with staff to figure out what's the best alternative moving forward on this project.
question, Ed?
Yes, ma'am.
So didn't they vote on, in our presentation, there were two recommendations from the staff. Did the board vote on those? And
I think
Agree with
they,
those, or-
I think they gave direction more so because the project is already out there.
Mhm.
And I can't exactly remember, but what the CAC recommended, I think it was more about taking it in the house. Was that right? So I think
Yeah.
there's an element of taking it in the house,
Yeah.
but also bringing in maybe a design firm, a design build firm to really focus on those 9.20 projects. Because I think that's the critical part, to get those off the ground with those incentives from the previous incentive program of 10.2.0.
well, I think one of the things was they were going to decrease the number of projects. Did they agree to do that?
They're really leaving it up to staff and working with the executive committee to really figure out what's the best path forward. And some of which was more about staff taking more ownership as a developer, but really learning through that process.
Did we make recommendations on that? We did, didn't we? No,
I think we did.
I thought we
I
did.
think we did,
We
yeah.
did.
I have my notes, but I didn't pull them out.
Yes, the CAC was advocating for some level of AVA ownership and continuing to explore the project. And in light of that, as well as the executive committee feedback, we issued a request for qualifications through a public works solicitation last week, and are going to be notifying qualified vendors as of tomorrow on selection to
That's good.
continue that process forward. So
That's great.
that's in motion.
Okay, good.
And we got some good bids.
We did receive bids, but it's an open process, so that's about all I can say.
Okay. When does that bid close and things get evaluated?
So it sounded
I
like
think
you
the
said
request for
take in-house.
qualifications were due last Thursday, I believe.
They would do, close of business Thursday.
Okay.
So we'll be making a selection of qualified vendors, tomorrow.
Oh,
And then issuing an RFP in a week or so.
So it's moving along quite nicely.
Very quickly, yes.
So what, did you decide on the same number of cities? Was it 6 cities versus, in terms of the number?
We issued, yes, the same 6 cities in the request for qualifications, was indicated the number of projects and size of
Okay,
projects.
so you didn't reduce the number of projects in your RFP?
The RFQ was for the same number of projects that we were planning to take to NEM 2.0. There's no guarantee we can get all of those done
Oh, okay.
by that time.
Let's allow the chair to complete the chair.
Yeah, I think that mostly covers it. Thank you for already stepping in. I think we're good.
Great. And we should also do public comment for this item and general public comment.
Oh, you want to do comment before the consent agenda?
We perhaps come back. to
Public comment, see two, I jumped ahead to my chair report.
Yeah.
Got it. Right, you want to do two first?
Well, I see that Vice Chair Souza has hand raised.
Okay.
So Vice Chair Souza, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Everybody. I do remember that, yes, this was something that Ava was considering, we would like Ava to consider as far as moving forward, since it involves storage and solar, and building up facilities and maybe even turning into something that would give us some insight into microgrids. I'm curious about the bidding though, that JP mentioned. Is the bidding for somebody else taking over the project, or would it be a bid for actually participating? That's it. Thank you.
Right, sure. We want to clarify on the RFQ. That was in heading, that's what she's asking.
Yeah, the RFQ is a request for qualifications in preparation for issuing a request for proposals. And that would be for up to 20 projects that Ava would develop, own, and operate, and then sell the power and resilience to the cities through the PPA that we had already previously negotiated with cities. So it's the likelihood would be to kind of reduce the total size of the portfolio and have Ava take some an ownership role as previously discussed with the CAC in the project development and ownership for our critical municipal facilities program.
Great, thank you. Okay. So with regards to public comment, there are no hands raised at this time. Perhaps just give a moment. There are no hands raised for the CAC chair report public comment.
Good. Do you want to go back to general public comments?
Great. So please use the raise hand feature, or just step up to the podium if you have general public comment. There are no hands raised at this time.
Any other comments from the CAC? Questions or clarifications to myself or staff?
Can you state again, there was 3 new members that were?
Yes, including new members, let me see, the board of directors, let me just go back to those notes. I think we have Oakland, I believe, is one of those, right? Oakland, Rowena Brown, and Councilmember Rowena Brown as new member for Oakland Primary, taking over for Dan Call. Councilmember Dan Goldstein Hayward as an alternate, he was sworn in, and Supervisor Robert Rickman for San Joaquin County as a primary. So San Joaquin, Oakland, and Hayward.
Thank you.
Of course. And Jerry, member Goldstein from Hayward is the alternate for member Roche, Judy Roche for Hayward. So that's just like an alternate.
Are all the members, city employees? Various city-
Electeds.
Elected.
Electeds, yeah, they're mostly elected individuals, either the council member and then maybe alternate or supervisor. Yes. All right, so we'll move forward. If there's no other questions, clarification, further comment, we have item C5, which is SB 540, a support letter. It is a board of directors action item presenting on SB 540 and the pathway initiatives. The staff is seeking approval to sign this letter for support SB 540. And I don't know if somebody from staff will speak to it.
Yes.
Thanks, Adrian. Greetings all. I'm Todd Edmister, the Director of the Public Policy Group here at AVA. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today. I'm at the Conference of California Public Utilities Council on today and tomorrow, but I will be at the board meeting in person. So apologies for that. You'll have to put up with me remotely today. Thank you for queuing up the slide deck, Adrian. So I'm presenting to you today on Senate Bill 540. This is the Pathways Initiative. And there's a little bit of backstory that I'll get into about what this is. But next slide. This is the order in which I'll approach things here. So what is the bill? What does it do? What is this Pathways Initiative thing of which it is a part? A little bit of back and forth on the benefits and concerns, and then close out with summary next steps. Next slide. All right, so what is SB 540? So SB 540 does really one thing. It cleaves off the responsibility for setting the market rules for the California Independent System Operator, CAISO, energy markets from CAISO to a new entity, the RO, the West-Wide Regional Organization. Here's the backstory. So the California Independent System Operator, as the name implies, operates the system here, the transmission system. And as part of that, in order to determine the order in which resources are dispatched and for whom they're credited, the ISO runs a number of different markets. And among them are energy markets. So that's different than, say, a market for ancillary services. It's only energy. It's got nothing to do with capacity or, say, RPS or other green attributes. It's just a market for energy and a fairly short-term market, day ahead, and the so-called real-time markets. So originally, when the CAISO was formed back in 1996, coming out of AB 1890, the board for the CAISO was appointed by stakeholders. Fast forward to the energy crisis, circa 2000, 2001, and what happened there was, in part, the board of the CAISO refused to make changes that the state of California wanted to see in the energy market rules. In particular, they were refusing to propose price caps on the real-time market. And at the time, the FERC, which was headed by a fellow named Pat Woods under the Bush administration, Pat Wood under the Bush administration, was refusing to mandate price caps. Now, this was a huge problem in that era because also coming out of restructuring, the utilities were only allowed to buy energy from CAISO markets, not allowed to hedge. Actually, technically, they were allowed only to buy from the power exchange, but the power exchange collapsed, so they were forced into the CAISO markets. And those markets were uncapped, and so they, and by extension, all of California's consumers were paying through the nose what to do. So the answer was that the state changed how the CAISO was governed. And instead of the board being appointed by stakeholders, the board would be appointed by the governor. And while everything CAISO remained subject to FERC jurisdiction, the ISO had what my old colleague Harvey Morris called the power of the filer. And so the board could direct that the CAISO file whatever it was that the board wanted, and by extension, because they were appointed by the state, the governor, the expectation was that the board would be moving the CAISO in line with the governor's preferences. And in fact, ultimately, price caps were proposed by the ISO and accepted by the FERC. Fast forward to today, 25 years later, much as it pains me to admit, and what's happening? Well, a number of things have changed. Probably most pertinent is that the Pacific Northwest has been increasingly leery of playing in a market where the rules are set by a board appointed by the governor of California. And so they have been rattling their swords and making noises about more or less taking their bat and ball and going somewhere else. That somewhere else is something called SPP Markets Plus, Southwest Power Pool, being another regional organization somewhat akin to the ISO, broader footprint. And essentially saying we're not going to sell primarily to California anymore. We're going to go over to this other market where the rules, where we have more say in how the rules are established for the markets. So see you later, California. The result has been an effort to change how the rules are established. That's what SB 540 will do, right? So SB 540 takes this one facet of the Cal ISO's operation, setting the market rules for the energy market, and shifts the responsibility to this new organization, the RO. And it sets up a fairly complicated governance scheme to do that and to ensure that there's consistency between what the RO is doing and what the ISO is doing, by extension, what the state of California wants the RO to do. But it does functionally make the RO independent of the state in terms of who is on the governing board and how the rules are established. And that's it, right? It's not changing any of the other Cal ISO functions. The Cal ISO remains the operator of the market rules. So that's significant because changing up one's infrastructure to participate in these different markets is a multi tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars exercise. I don't have to go through any of that. It just cleaves off the rule making responsibility. Doesn't change any of the RPS rules. So the SB 100 rules that govern procurement and set the timeline for moving to a zero emissions portfolio requirement for all load serving entities such as ours, still in place. Doesn't change any of the resource adequacy or capacity rules, doesn't change any of the RPS rules around what counts towards that zero emission portfolio. All of that is unchanged. It changes this one thing. Next slide, please. And I've gotten in front of it, but this is the what the bill does. Some of this is already happening. So there's already a Cal ISO market that allows for participation from non-California entities. The idea here is to change the rules in order to keep those entities participating in California markets. So we won't see the PowerXs and the BPAs going over to Markets Plus and not participating in Cal ISO anymore. That would be a bad thing from a financial standpoint. The positive is by keeping them in and also pulling in entities that currently are not participating in this broader market, we will see reduced transaction costs in connection with bringing in those additional resources. Right now, it's a seams issue. They're not primarily participating in our market, so we're a secondary consideration. Now we would not be. So the modeling around this that we mentioned in the memo shows benefits, ranging from 180 some million dollars up to $500 million, kind of depending on the levels of participation that we see, or even taking into account the possibility that nonetheless PowerX and BPA and some others opt not to participate. They leave. There would still be some savings here. The point on the bottom I do want to flag is that the Cal ISO will continue to operate the markets as they have previously. It's just the rule setting authority that moves elsewhere. Okay, next slide. And this is a little bit of a graphic, right? So you can see in the different boxes here, those are the things the Cal ISO does. And so the little dotted line is showing the piece here that will shift away from the CAISO to the regional organization. So the transmission planning, system operation, all of the other things in those boxes in the top line unchanged. Next slide. All right, so how did we get here? Well, so this is the Pathways Initiative. There have been efforts previously to shift everything that the ISO does out of the state, and those have encountered a wide array of opposition, never went anywhere. So what happened was the various folks who'd been arguing with each other about these things got together in a room, and it was principally the unions representing the PUC, representing the IOU workers, and a variety of environmental groups that had opposed previous efforts in this direction, got together with the governor's office and with the various commercial interests who had supported these regionalization efforts. And this is the deal that emerged, which was this one sliver of the ISO's functions would go to a regional organization. Everything else would stay with the ISO. And so what we see in SB 540 is actually a bill that has been drafted by labor, which had historically spiked all attempts at regionalization. The quid pro quo seems to be, in return for this relatively small shift of governance, efforts to do a broader shift of governance will go away. We'll see if that plays out, but that's the concept, and that's why we're seeing labor not only supporting the bill but actually authoring it. Okay, next slide. So why do it? Well, I mentioned earlier there were some cost savings estimates here, 182 million to 800 million. This comes up in the affordability context all the time, right? Like, if you want to make something seem attractive or horrible, you'll point to the dollar numbers, because in energy, the absolute magnitude of things is always kind of staggering. If you want to make it seem like nothing, you'll point to percentages. 800 million for the state for an entire year, maybe not all that much in terms of overall affordability, but law of small numbers, you add up enough small numbers, they become big numbers, right? What's the saying from Dirksen? 100 million here, 100 million there. Pretty soon you're talking real money. So there seem almost certain to be some savings associated with this effort. We kind of did a back of the envelope for Ava to figure out, all right, well, if we take a percentage of that savings based on load share, it could max out at around $30 million per year. Again, in the context of our overall spending, which is in the hundreds of millions, not a huge number, but we will take it where we can get it, frankly. And 30 million is an absolute dollar, still a significant chunk of change. So that's the plus that we're foreseeing from this, and you'll see some other operational potential benefits here. And that's the benefits in a nutshell, right? Some dollar savings for us, and by extension our customers, perhaps potentially improved reliability, some reduced emissions. The concern that's been raised, and we'll see this in a moment, is coal from Montana, but the modeling actually suggests Montana should be more worried about renewables from California than the reverse. And just a more broad optimization, right? Which is that right now we're curtailing a decent chunk of our renewable portfolio. Now we have an opportunity to see that sold to other states that currently aren't buying into it. And then, by extension, we would be able to achieve the climate goals more cost effectively. Let's go to the cons. So these are the other considerations. So the big one, and this is why I laid out the history of the governance, is that California will cede what vestigial control it has had over the markets function of the ISO. And that's why we have the governance structure that we have today, right? This came out of the energy crisis. And the concerns then are to some extent valid today, right? FERC was not our friend then. Under a Trump administration, FERC will almost certainly not be our friend going forward. The counterbalance is things have changed materially, right? We have seen now the emergence of competitive markets that could take away a significant chunk of the generation on which California depends if we do not make this change. That's very different than it was in 2000, 2001. In addition, I would note that much less procurement now happens through the ISO markets than it did 20, 25 years ago. A lot of the procurement in California, most of it, frankly, right now, 70%-ish, is transacted through longer term contracts, longer term deals, the PPAs that we bring before the board from time to time. Exposure is much smaller than it was back then. And then finally, the coal from Montana thing, you know, again, I think the economics of it are that we're going to see things going the other way. But also there have been a slew of laws passed in the intervening 20 plus years that make that more or less impossible, between SB 100 and the mandates that it imposes for renewable procurement, the emissions procurement standards, excuse me, the EPS, that imposes limits on the emissions for contracts that PUC jurisdictional entities can sign for emitting resources. All of this makes it exceedingly unlikely that there are going to be deals done for coal. To the extent that we're worried about, on the margin, the real-time market transactions coming in, that's already happening through the Western Energy Imbalance Market. So SB 540 is not going to change that. So bottom line is, we really kind of have to do this, or we're going to see a significant chunk of generation not being available to us with adverse financial and environmental impacts. We do expect to see not huge, but material savings emerging from this for the state as a whole and for AVA. And so consequently, we're recommending that we support this. And in so doing, we'd be joining with a number of our peers, including CalCCA, Marin Clean Energy, San Diego Community Power, et cetera, a slew of environmental organizations and a slew of labor organizations. So that's where we are coming from and why we are making the recommendation that we are. So let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate the report, Alex, on this letter of support, Power Pathway Initiative. Just a quick sound check. Can you hear us okay? From your ear, can you hear us okay?
I'm struggling to hear you a little bit, but I'm not sure there's anything that you can do about it within the room.
Make sure we're in our new space, so we'll make sure you can hear questions, concerns from the committee, so we can clarify. Any clarifying questions from those in the room? Peter? Yes.
Todd, that was terrific, but this is Peter. But I'm pretty ignorant about this stuff, so excuse me for asking really simplistic questions. You showed a slide of all the potential benefits and they were like everything. And I understand that. And you showed the concern that if we don't do it, we're going to lose. So if I were giving an elevator speech about this, would I say we're doing this because otherwise energy suppliers who are now supplying California or who could supply California's growing needs are going to go elsewhere? And while it may have been true that in the past Arizona had all it needed or Nevada had all it needed, there's a huge appetite for energy right now. And if we don't make some changes, we're going to lose supply. Is that one part of it?
That is a part of it, yes. That's the avoiding the bad stuff part of it. And
Right.
then there's the good part, or the getting the good stuff part of it as well. But yeah, that's definitely a big chunk of it.
So in the good part, you said we reduced GHG, et cetera, by up to 31%. And I'm like, is that because it's wind from Wyoming or SunZia from New Mexico and Arizona? Why is it that entering into the SB 540 RO would reduce our carbon footprint?
Well, different flavors of hour, right? It probably won't reduce AVA's because we're already on an aggressive glide path to zero. This is the solar to Montana.
For California, for SB 100, how would it reduce our state carbon footprint? Is it because of these out-of-state renewable sources that will be coming in? Because otherwise, I mean, we're building it here as well. So I'm just trying to figure out why entering into the RO would do that, as opposed to having us now export renewable energy, for example, to other states.
Yeah, it won't. I mean, California's already going to zero, right? I think that 31% is regional.
Oh, that's a regional reduction. Okay.
Pretty sure, yeah.
West
It says California's, And on the slide, it says California's
California.
fine.
Is it, yeah, in the
Okay.
slide it says California would reduce by
Okay.
31%. I'm just trying to figure out the math on that and why.
Yeah, that may be wrong.
And the final question is the basic one. What does it mean? What is the RO gonna do? I don't get it. I don't know what it means that they'll figure out the rules of energy markets as opposed to what the CAISO does. What does it really mean to do that?
So the CAISO files tariffs at FERC that contain all of the things that the CAISO is going to do, right? And so among those are the market rules that govern things like when you can bid into the markets and how you can bid, and going back to why we do this, why we have the governance structure that we do, things like, will there be a cap on the bid that you can submit? Could you ask for $100,000 a megawatt hour? So right now, the way that those rules are established is that the CAISO board will direct the staff to file tariffs that the CAISO's board, approve. And what shifts now is that things like, let's stick with the price caps because it's an easy thing to wrap your head around. The direction to file a price cap would no longer come from the CAISO board to CAISO staff. It would now come from the RO to the RO's staff. It would be the RO that would file at FERC and say, we would like a price cap of X. And then they would go back to the CAISO and say, CAISO, you're our market operator per contract. Conform your operation of the market to this rule that we have put through this FERC process. Does that help any, or is that just
Is
more confusing?
price caps the only issue, or does it doesn't have to do with the type of energy? You said that. I think you said that.
Yeah.
But what does it have to do with definitions of RA or things of that?
Well, no, RA is not in play at all.
So
Yeah,
this is an energy only.
energy
market
only.
issue.
Right, and there is no specific gripe that I'm aware of. Right, the gripe is more what if, like it.
No, I get that.
Yeah, so if you're a Montana seller or a Montana PUC person looking at whether you want kind of your utilities to participate in this thing, you're worried, oh, well, now I'm turning over my sovereign authority as a Montanan to the state of California. I don't want to do that. I don't know in particular, still in my Montana role, I don't know in particular what it is about the market that I don't like or won't like, but I know that I want some say in how things are run. That's really it.
Okay.
I was wondering what, so with the western states, what states are we talking about in the west? You mentioned Montana, it's not on that list that was on the slide, so,
So, let's see here.
yeah. Because it said here New Mexico, where was it? Yeah, it said Arizona, Oregon, Washington, New Mexico, California.
It could be broader than that. Let's see.
And then we'll go, it was Harper, remember Harper
I have,
asked? No, yeah, just making sure, yeah.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and take the next question while I pull it up.
well, so the next question I had was, so how will, who will be appointed? How will they appoint the people in the direction of the RO? How will that be? If they don't like California, people don't like California leading it, who will it be elected representatives from various states, or what's the governance going to look like?
Yeah. I'll just pull the language up here. All right.
Todd, it must be so hard to be at a conference and also dealing with us.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm just trying to find the exact language in 540 here because I want to make sure I get it right.
Todd, I can jump in if you need me to add
Oh
some
yeah, if you've got
context.
it, fingertips, Dominic, that'd be great. My colleague,
Yeah.
Sorry here. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm Dominic. I'm a policy coordinator, working under Todd with the policy team. To your question about the government structure of the RO, the proposal through the Pathways Initiative proposal is for a 7-member governing board, elected, basically chosen by a formation committee that's sort of comprised of the various stakeholders that would participate in the RO, and some of which are already participating in the Pathways Initiative Formation Committee. So it's still to be determined who those folks will be, but that's sort of the idea of how this will be structured.
Well, so, I mean, I guess with the governance, my question, concern, and it was a little bit in the comments from Clean Power to the People. We know FERC's not going to be that friendly, and we know states like Montana are not sympathetic to what California wants to achieve in terms of renewable energy and climate and greenhouse gas reduction. So I'm just wondering, it seems like, you know, people probably don't like California's approach because we're trying to be zero emissions. So my question really, the bigger question is, how much influence will these other states have? And we're watering ourselves down because I think we should be going full forward into the future, doing the lowest carbon energy we possibly can. And are these states now going to build coal plants and then we're going to have to bring them in? Are they going to bring nuclear power plants online? I mean, it'd probably be past 2027, but still, it's just that they don't seem to be going in the same direction. Not Oregon and Washington, we know who our friends are, but there's some states that probably in the West that are not that forward thinking in terms of carbon and our goals. So I guess my concern is, you know, Ava's doing a lot and I don't want Ava to be slowed down by, you know, these other entities. And so what's your feeling, or can you respond to that, or have you heard?
Sure. The procurement. Oh, sorry. If you finish.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I am.
Yeah. No, the procurement rules, you know, what we can buy are still state statutes. So if California says you cannot, which they do, it says you cannot enter into a long-term arrangement with an emitting power plant that exceeds certain thresholds of carbon, or says you can't enter into procurement arrangements with, and this is eventually where we're going to get to, with emitting resources at all, then them's the rules, right?
Mm-hmm. But, okay, I mean, cost, so, and kind of carrying that on to cost, right now the argument is this is going to, you know, save a lot, be a very beneficial cost-wise. I can see a scenario where it's beneficial for us cost-wise because our rates are so high that we have to sell. I mean, we're putting ourselves potentially in a position where we would go because it's a better cost savings or whatever.
Well, that could happen anyway, right? Like we could decide to walk away from our environmental goals. That's what you're positing. I don't think this is going to have any impact on that.
Okay, and I have one last question, I promise.
Yeah.
So how will this help the ratepayer?
If the cost savings come out in the range that's forecast by this Brattle study, it's kind of the thing everyone's relying on right now, then it will result in some reduction in the generation component of everybody's bills. You may need scientific notation to find it, but that's kind of the nature of these cost reductions. And again, you know, small numbers eventually become big numbers if you can find enough places. Look, we're looking under the couch cushions for these change with a lot of these efforts to reduce costs. This is one of those things, and if you find enough of them, you can have an impact. So the real question is we've got this quantified potential range of savings. That's a good thing. How does that balance against loss of governance of this element of what the CAISO currently does? That's the trade-off. And set against that is the prospect of some of these major generators not wanting to participate in California markets unless this governance change happens. So, you know, we stand a chance to save a small but material amount of money here for Ava, for the state as a whole. Maybe we can help green some of these other states because we do have zero marginal cost energy in surplus right now. These other states don't. And, you know, we're potentially keeping in our fold some significant, very important generators who might otherwise leave. So that's how we landed where we did. I'm trying to come around to your elevator pitch over there.
It just seems to me that Californians have invested a lot in solar and put a lot of energy into greening our states, and they will benefit. These other states are going to benefit from our cost, you know, all these costs we're bearing, and I just don't see the return. I mean,
Oh, well, that's an easy one. Like we've over-invested. We're curtailing, right? We're generating solar that we can't use, wind that we can't use.
but I thought that was just to keep Diablo going because you can't shut it down and start it up.
No. Nope. This is over generation conditions at certain hours of the day, certain days of the year.
Okay, so you're saying the,
We're over 100% solar at noon. And
Yeah.
that's what we're
In the
curtailing.
summer.
It's not to keep the outlook on.
I did.
Well, you can't shut Diablo
but you
down.
can't shut it down, so they have to, yeah.
I would take
Well, you could, I mean, we were going to, and then we didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, one second. Let's take Member Harper's question, if that's okay.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to your comments, other comments in the room. Member Harper?
Thanks. I guess first is just a procedural question. I see this as a recommendation that the board's going to be voting on Wednesday. And I noticed, is this an action item for us to make a determination on, or is this an informational item?
It would be,
CSE.
provide a recommendation to the board of the directors, if so moved. Or we can say neutral, but it'll be up to the committee to decide to support staff, stay neutral, or have a different recommendation to the board of the directors.
Okay, understood. That's super helpful. And then I guess onto the bill, having only, been able to read about this over like the weekend and today, I think I would definitely need more time to be informed on whether to make a recommendation one way or the other. But I have heard a lot of concerns too, about, California ceding authority for rulemaking to a new independent organization that doesn't exist yet, that would have to go through FERC review and approval processes. And I feel like there's got to be costs there as well of creating a new regional organization that's managing that as well. I guess, yeah. And then one of the other concerns I'm hearing is that about potential for this leading to like renewable energy projects really being prioritized in other states and kind of like impacting California renewable generation or future generation projects. So could you like talk through a few of those? I guess that's my first one. This seems like a very hairy, complex issue, and seems like quite a bit to make a determination on with a really short amount of time.
Well, I'll pick up on the last item first. Right now there are rules governing, again, what you can count towards your RPS. There's a hierarchy, the PCC1, PCC2, PCC3 categorizations. And you have to buy essentially a certain number of PCC1s. All of those rules are, and PCC1s are in state generation or in CAISO, in CAISO's footprint generation. And all of that is unchanged. And the definition of CAISO's footprint is unchanged. So if a wind project in New Mexico or Arizona or wherever doesn't count under the status quo, it won't count because of that, right? None of the RPS rules are changing. So I don't think that's a valid concern, right? Unless we change the rules now, which again wouldn't be related to WAIM and pathways and SB 540, would just be changing the rules. What doesn't count now won't count because of SB 540. The cost thing, all that this RO is doing is writing rules, so it's relatively affordable. It is not doing the operational work. If it were taking over the operational piece, then yeah, that would be a big hit, right? Because setting up one of these things, or even setting up the ability to participate in a market on behalf of a market participant is very expensive, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. Right, really, this is just changing, it's just changing who writes the rules. So I don't mean, there's some overhead with that, but it's not meaningful, I would say. And the FERC jurisdiction piece, all of this is already FERC jurisdictional. Let's be clear about that. The issue is who controls what gets submitted to FERC. So instead of remove, right? We're already in a world where FERC can say no to a CalISO filing. That doesn't change. It's the power of the filer and who the filer is. That's what's changing.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What do you see as the power of the filer? Surely there's got to be benefits that come with that.
Oh yeah, there are. Yeah, because you write the proposal, right? So you're essentially setting the terms of the debate. That's the power of the filer.
That's what we'd be giving up.
And that's what,
That's what we would be giving up, correct?
That's what we would be giving up. That's what the state would be giving up, right? The ability to pick the board that will dictate to the staff what gets filed
Mhm.
for the market rules.
I think Lutz wants to go, then we'll go to Peter, and then we'll go back to you.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you.
yeah. Why is this being brought to the board at this, why is this being brought to the board at this time when there's other significant energy bills being proposed at the Senate and the Assembly? There's like the
A couple of reasons. One is to make sure that everybody kind of has time to look at this in isolation, right? We have viewed pathways as being of sufficient import to carve it off from all of the other legislation that's out there, because it is a complicated thing and it's worthy of separate treatment. As far as why now, so people are essentially picking sides, and we are being called on to pick sides. AVA is being called on to pick sides, right? So there was a letter that went out earlier this month, which had CalCCA and a number of our other peers sign on to it. Unlike much other legislation, this is probably what it's going to be. We don't expect to see material amendments, whereas a lot of other legislation, it may or may not go anywhere. It may or may not be today in the form that it will be come the end of the come the amendment deadline. So there's not a lot of point in talking about it. This one, what you're looking at is probably what you're going to get. So that's why now.
But that seems like if it's not going to change, why are we worrying about it now? And why are we being, who called on AVA to do this? Who wrote the letter that got it on the board?
It's a group letter that was authored by let's see. Oh, sorry. I guess I should wait for the chair to say if he wants me to answer the question.
You're welcome to do so. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know we have one member off the leave by 8 o'clock, so we want to get towards, I mean, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. So at the top of the letterhead, it was the Coalition of California Utility Employees and California Nevada State Association of Electrical Workers. It's co-signed and nominally co-written by NRDC, Environmental Defense Fund, Google, Cal Chamber, Western States Council, Microsoft, Union of Concerned Scientists, Amazon, Clean Energy Buyers Association. Anyway, I could keep listing them out, but it's this coalition letter. On the CCA side, CalCCA, MCE, and SVCE.
Well, hold on. I think, Peter, you had a comment?
Yeah, Todd, I'm sorry. I think you told Indira and I didn't quite hear it. What is I realize that the opposition letter we got said this only will reduce bills by 0.16%, but it's still $800 million, or up to $800 million. How do we save that much money?
The idea is that entities that are currently not participating in the existing Western energy imbalance market because of concerns about the governance, essentially, and so we're not selling into California, will sell into California. So that's the upper bound, right? That all of these entities in adjacent states that are steering clear of California will start to enter into California. That's the 800 million. The sort of low case is that some, but not all of them will come in.
But, I'm sorry, the fact that they're selling to us, are you saying that that will reduce prices of energy because they're competing?
That will reduce price of energy because they're competing. Yeah, they will be entering bids in the market that are currently.
Sorry, just trying to make the connection between their entering the market.
Greater supply.
Greater supply. Well, when markets are fixed and oligarchic, greater supply doesn't always result in lower prices, so.
Yeah, I mean, that is true as a sort of basic microeconomic principle. I don't think that we have an oligarchy situation in the West as a whole, at least with respect to individual generator bids. Most hours. So I'm pretty confident that if a bunch of more folks who aren't currently bidding in the markets are bidding in the markets, we will see declines, which is what the
I will
model
say
says.
it's a pretty impressive coalition.
It's remarkable. I've never seen anything like it. Never seen anything like it. Like to have all of these folks on the same side of something. And I think we are all very strongly motivated by a concern about PowerX and BPA taking their bat and ball and going home. That would be bad.
Member Lefebvre,
Yes,
project, please.
I don't know, Todd, if you were right, I don't, Todd was able to see this letter from Audrey with the,
Yeah, Audrey, you know, so yes, go, sorry.
yes, with the People's Clean Power. And so there apparently was a hearing by the Senate Energy Commission on March 12th. And there was concerns expressed at that hearing by senators, California Senators Jerry McNerney from Pleasanton and also Senator Aisha Wahib from Fremont. Are you familiar with this and their concerns?
I am. It was an informational hearing. It wasn't actually a hearing on the bill. It was about pathways writ large. And I absolutely would encourage you to listen in because I think what we're seeing is a misunderstanding of the scope of what's in play here. And a lot of the questions were around figuring out what really are we talking about. And yeah, there were concerns expressed, not dissimilar to what we're hearing here. I think there were good answers to those. So yeah, if you want to go deep on it, listen in. It's worth it.
Let me, 1 second, let me manage. Alex, you have your raised hand. You have a comment to add to Todd's commentary?
Oh, yes, thank you. I just wanted to also respond to the question of how this will create savings. I think it's both that there'll be more competitive markets, which would also mean that when California has a glut of solar, it also means we might be able to sell it back. So it's not just about buying it. It may also mean that California could be exporting more of the surplus renewable energy that we have, because it could easily be a cloudy day in Oregon and a sunny day here in California. And then also I just wanted to give a quick time check that it's after 7 and we've got another meaty topic on deck right now.
Understood. I think
Thanks.
To your point, Alex, so if it's cloudy in California and we're importing other energy from other states, it could be anything. So I think that's sort of the flip, and then we don't have control over what's coming in our way. So then we're just impacting our state and we lose control about that flow. And I think to the point, I might just jump in here, there was a lot of mention about this Brado study in the chamber there at State Senate and here. So I almost feel like we don't have enough information to really make an informed decision. I think that's what I'm feeling, but I also want to go to Vice Chair Souza, who has a hand raised at public comment.
Yes.
I will jump to that. I will come back for any other comments. And then I'll look for a motion and we can close out and move on to the next item.
Great. Vice Chair Souza, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Oh, hey, guys. I saw this article about, I think it's Bonneville Power Administration. Is this the same thing? Is that they made a draft decision to join Southwest Power Pool's markets? Is that what kind of initiated all of this?
Oh,
Because I've seen a couple articles on this.
It's been happening in parallel, but yeah, that's,
So let's
the
be
hope
clear,
is that
let's
this will keep them
One
wondering.
second, Todd. So Vice Chair Souza's coming in as a member of the public. So let's make sure she can speak to it. And then we'll direct to respond to it, just to keep it in order.
Actually, I don't mind just giving up my time, but I wanted to say also that it's really, it could be to California's benefit, is what I'm reading in the couple of articles that I've studied regarding this shift in power from the northern power companies to avoid California's CAISO. But anyway, I'm not seeing this as something that is as dangerous to California as it is to other states, and their price is rising. So this is a big power struggle. It's a big shift, and you know, I think that we should protect ourselves. I think that this thinking about it and talking about it is necessary because it's happening. It's going to happen one way or the other. But anyway, that's giving it my time now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Is there any further public comment? Please use the hand raise feature.
Yes. Come closer to the podium. Yes, sorry.
There we go. Yeah, hi, Ayla Paz with Local Clean Energy Alliance. Wanted to offer public comment that Local Clean Energy Alliance doesn't support this. We actually have a lot of concerns for some of the cons that were brought up. Understand that there's a lot of cost savings associated with this, but we believe that it distracts from local clean energy investments that AVA, in its original mandate, AVA has a commitment to local clean energy investments, and exposing smaller local clean energy to the free market would swallow up and kill a lot of these. We believe would a good comparison would be NAFTA in terms of how that would offer a lot of instability and a lot of inability for these smaller local clean energy investments to be able to compete in this kind of market. And again, a distraction from local clean energy investments. AVA made a commitment to local clean energy, and we believe that that is supposed to be the mandate that it follows. And also, there's a lot of concerns about being vulnerable to, again, as was mentioned, a president who has made it very clear that he wants to kill clean energy and that he wants to overstep a lot of his power, and has overstepped a lot of his position as president. And we don't think, and I don't personally think, that California should be in a position to be vulnerable to that and should place itself in that kind of position as, again, a leader of clean energy. So, yeah, and to quite a few points that, especially that member Harper mentioned, this is a really complex issue. I believe that both the board and the CAC deserve to have much more time and much more resources invested in being able to understand such a bill, and before there is a much more informed decision to be made on whether to support it or not. So, thank you.
Audrey Ichinose, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Yes.
Oh, great. So I am Audrey Ichinose, and I'm the one whose memo has been circulated. So I don't know if it serves a purpose to read it through, although I guess I will. So there are 3 main arguments against not supporting the staff's proposal about SB 540. And one is that California takes grave risks. Yeah, it would yoke us to the Western coal and oil drilling states with uncertain means of withdrawing, and faced with the possibility of Trump's weaponizing FERC to punish California and its clean energy leadership. California would risk losing control over its RPS choices, I think, and its ability to achieve its clean energy goals. Secondly, these risks would reap minuscule gains. And of course, according to the Brattle study of possible outcomes, California will be saving 0.16%, 1.16 of 1% of total customer bills in 2032, and will experience no change in renewables curtailment. That's really important. Thirdly, contrary to staff's report, there is widespread uncertainty and doubt about this bill. The staff report cites only two opponents, Consumer Watchdog and former CPUC President Loretta Lynch. While neither of these opponents can be considered insignificant, in Ms. Lynch's case, the report seems to trivialize her long experience with CAISO's wholesale markets. The staff report also fails to mention the 125 groups statewide that signed onto a letter of opposition. It would behoove Ava's CAC and board members to listen to the senator's questions at the recent March 12th informational hearing on the Pathways Plan in the Senate Energy Committee. Among those expressing skepticism and the great need for more information were Senators Jerry McNerney of Pleasanton and Aisha Wahab of Fremont. And so for all of these reasons, it would not be advisable for Ava to submit a letter of support for SB 540. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jessica Tovar, recognized for 3 minutes.
Jessica Tovar with the Local Clean Energy Alliance. I wanted to urge the community advisory not to be pushed into voting for a legislative bill that has repeatedly come to the legislation, and we've repeatedly fought because it is actually very harmful. We're talking about ceding our power. We're talking about killing local clean energy investments. If you think net energy metering 2.0 was the last nail on the coffin, actually this is it, the regionalization of the grid. Let me remind you that it is the transmission infrastructure that has caused some very devastating and deadly wildfires. That is the very reason why our rates go up and up. And that is causing an affordability crisis. So I urge you to vote to actually delay this, because this will have long-term implications. I don't understand why we're not getting information first and given time to think about it. I'm also very disappointed in CalCCA for approving this, and I'm not impressed by the signers of that letter. As a matter of fact, I see a lot of those folks that were mentioned on that letter has been problematic in really advancing, regionalization of our grid and really killing our local power. Right now, more than ever, in the context of what we are living in and the powers that be, we need to preserve our local autonomy and continue on the path of creating the investments we need at a local level, including the jobs, as well as reducing pollution here at home. It makes no sense to outsource all of that. It might make sense for the utility companies if you want to make PG&E and other utilities richer, and that's who it's actually going to benefit. It's not going to benefit the people. And what we need to be talking about is how do we get these benefits to reach community people. This isn't it. This is actually really harmful in the long term. This will kill any proposals to change our energy system in a good way that would work for our communities. I urge you, if you're going to vote tonight, to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Any other comments from our board here, Kitty?
I have a comment from the ad hoc energy affordability committee. You guys can add to this, but in our discussions, we were talking more about getting smaller, more municipal utility districts, microgrids, we've been talking about like in order to manage the cost to get smaller. And this seems to be the absolute opposite of kind of what we were doing there. So my recommendation would be that we either delay and find out more about this, or I think if I was gonna vote right now, I'd vote no.
I have another question for Todd. How much of AVA's energy comes through Cal ISO? You mentioned earlier that it's a smaller and smaller part of California's energy is actually coming through Cal ISO, but how much of AVA's energy would this actually affect?
Better question.
I don't know which proportion of our portfolio is not hedged. That'd be a question for the procurement team. I can say for CCAs overall, about 30%.
30%.
Only 30%?
Only 30% comes through Cal ISO?
Yep,
So then this is insignificant.
that's it. Most of it is long-term forward purchase.
Okay, but those, I'm sorry, those, long-term power purchase agreements still run through the Cal ISO grid, correct?
They do, but the financial settlements are not handled, or you're not paying the Cal ISO price.
Absolutely.
All of the energy comes through the Cal ISO because the Cal ISO runs the grid.
That's the grid.
Yeah.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
For my point, I'd just like to better understand this Brattle study, and so I would want to read through that more and go through the comments of the state. And I hear there's a valid proposition financially, but we're not really looking at the people, or not really resolving the concerns by our community members that are raised in this letter and in public testimony. So I would either suggest that we delay or vote no on this recommendation by staff. So I can take a motion either which way.
Before making any motion, I would just like to say I feel like we probably don't have enough information. I feel that if I did have more information, I'd probably be inclined to vote to support it. Because over the years, when I see this kind of coalition and realize that it was driven by labor, but with environmental community and so on, which, and especially when it's UCS as well as NRDC and EDF, I feel like I probably would vote for it, but I think at this time, it's clear that this group does not have enough information to support it and might otherwise oppose it. So I will move that we take no position on this.
So I have a first. Not hearing a second, it dies unless I see Pete, you have a hand up?
Yes, I second the motion.
You will second the motion. PS is Stevenson. There's a second by member Stevenson. Other discussion, what does it mean to be no position? It means we're not gonna, or yes or no, or we just basically say neutral on it for now?
We're not gonna send a recommendation to the board of directors.
No recommendation.
It's not that we are neutral or not making a recommendation. I mean, or that we're saying to the board, no recommendation. We are simply not transmitting any recommendation to the board.
I'm happy to carry any comments of concern if that's the will of this committee as well. So you can either send me some comments or we can draft it. Member Landry.
Well, the comment is in this letter that there were 125 groups statewide that signed onto a letter of opposition, 69 indivisible California organization and 56 environmental and social justice organizations were opposed. So I would definitely, I cannot at this point support the bill first of all, one of the reasons is I don't have enough information. And I think it's very important that the CAC have enough time to understand what the legislation is that we're supporting. And so I either need to have more information, or if I voted tonight, I would have to oppose it as I understand the bill. But I think it's better, yeah, that's what I'm gonna say.
Would you like to substitute motion to oppose it versus no position? Just want to be clear, if you have that right to raise the substitute motion, and if it gets second, then we take that one first, and then we go to Member Weiner's bill. Member Weiner's motion.
Well, it's an action item tonight.
It is an action
So
item for the
then-
board of directors, we can do
Yeah,
it.
then I would move to oppose it.
Opposed, so we have an oppose on the table. I want to hear if there's a second.
I would second.
Member Pakastuna,
And the re-
Weiner will second it, yes.
I'd second it, but I would like to add that I don't feel that my questions, I don't even know the area of the RO, like which states are included or not included, which I think is a significant thing. Because, and also, I think when, just as a Todd, just in future, it would be helpful to me to see pro column and a con column, so that we could see sort of like what the dialogue that's happened, instead of us kind of reinventing, which is why I feel like we don't have enough information, because I know that you're making the recommendation, you're the expert, but I feel like in terms of advising, it would be nice to kind of have more meat as to what we're talking about. Because, I mean, I have relatives in Utah and Montana. I know these people do not want clean energy necessarily, not everybody, of course, but these are states that are not necessarily on the same energy pathway as we are. So I would just like to know, before saying we're gonna go in together, how is that gonna affect Ava specifically? And maybe it's only 30%, but, so that's why I would say no now, but I'm also willing to wait and get more information. So is that an unhelpful second?
No, it's a second, so whatever rationale you have, it just, regardless, but it's for the rest of the committee to really hear it and decide how they want to vote to support the substitute motion. All right, we're gonna vote on substitute motion unless there's any question or concerns, and just go.
Procedurally, we've got a motion and a second, now we've got a substitute motion and a
Yes.
second.
So we'll go with the substitute. If that passes, then the first one dies.
Okay.
And when we say pass, we have a quorum of 7. We have 7 members here. We need a unanimous vote for this to pass.
So
We have a quorum of 7.
So
That
we
is
need
quorum for the
4.
committee. So we can either go
4, using 4 votes to pass
4
it.
votes.
That's our quorum.
I'd like to speak out against the motion to oppose SB 540, which is, I think, what the motion is. I think it's very clear from what Todd said that there's no way that this bill would result in importing more non-renewable energy into California, because the control over providing that energy and what type of energy is provided remains with the PUC, not with the ISO and not with this regional organization. So I'm not concerned about losing control over what type of energy is brought into California. That is not what this bill's about. The bill's about setting rules about bidding for into the market, things of that sort. It's not clear to me that I like it because I don't know enough, but it is clear to me that it won't have a negative impact on our drive for renewable energy. If anything, it will allow more solar projects to be built in places like Kings and Kern County, because it can export their power through this market. So I just want to speak out against a motion to oppose.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody, because I know Alex is having me on the clock. I can tell he's on screen, so he's like, feel the pressure. It's like we want to have a good conversation, and I know the other items could be meaty, but this is the first item on our agenda. I feel like I don't have enough information. From what I see from the community, I would want to lean towards opposing it until we had more information. better understanding that even from the state senate, I just looked at the transcript, there's concern there about what can or cannot happen. So I'm not willing to support something that hasn't been really vetted out and showing to no position. Seems like I didn't really do my homework. I feel like they're asking us to take sides, and I think this committee should take a side. And I think regardless of what we do, we can provide this information to the board of directors, and they ultimately will make the choice to choose sides. They can also maybe have deferred for additional time to bring it back in April, if there is time, but I don't know about the timing on this this letter, because the state senate is still reviewing it as an informational item, so I believe they'll probably continue more time in that process. So if we get them to defer and give us more time to review it, then maybe we can look at this again and maybe then support it. Ideally, staff would have more time to engage with community members to obtain their support and reduce the concern that we're seeing here today. So with that, I will call for the vote.
Great. Just one point.
Is there other comment?
Member Lachman has joined us, but he's not from a remote. He's not at a notice location. So
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So this is for the vote for the substitute motion to oppose the position. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Weiner.
No.
Member Balkasoon.
Yes.
Member Stevenson.
No.
Member Harper.
Yes, I don't know if this fully encapsulates that. I'd like to see a delay. I'd like to see more time. So if we can't have more time, then I guess I'll vote yes on this.
Member Litz. Member Litz.
I mean, yes.
Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yes for the opposed position.
So opposed position moves forward to the recommendation to the board of directors, and with the caveat that we would have wanted to have more time to digest this, and
That's
ideally
really important.
they would want to
It is
delay
important.
this vote
It is.
based on this information.
I think that's a really important comment.
Thank you. I'll include those in my comments on Wednesday. Thank you for everybody's thinking, and I appreciate everybody's focus, and we'll move on to the next item. I think Alex is ready for it, right?
Hurry up, again.
Hi, everyone. This is Annie Henderson. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at AVA. I'll be presenting on the Local Development Fund reconciliation and overview this evening. Great, thank you, Adrian. Thought I'd just get us moving given the time. So we can go to the next slide. So I'll start off just by sharing with the group that this was presented to our executive committee as part of a public meeting on March 5th. And we led off with this slide on methodology. So essentially, for those not familiar with the Local Development Fund, there was a point in time sort of after our first year-ish in existence, when it was decided that the funds committed to activities largely around our programs. So the work that JP, who's there in the room, his team initiates and executes on, that those funds, instead of just wiping clean each year, if they were unspent, they would in fact roll over to the next year. And so that's what we're looking at tonight. What was the total budget allocated over time? What has the spend been? And then sort of looking at what are our current priorities and strategy, and how do these things align? So for the budget timeframe, it begins in fiscal year 20. So that's the time from July 2019 to June 2020. So when I say FY, it's the year that it ends in, just to be clear. I'm sorry, can you please hold on one? Okay, sorry, we have little distractions here tonight.
JP doesn't hold it against me, it's clock, so that's okay.
All right, so and then for, as I just mentioned, in fiscal years 18 and 19, the funding that was allocated to the work under local development, if it wasn't spent, it just sort of went away, which is the way that the rest of our budget typically works. So for marketing, as an example, the board approves a certain budget. If it doesn't get spent, it does not roll over to the next year. But we started that feature in fiscal year 20. The end date for this, the end date for this timeframe for the budget is fiscal year 25. So that's the year that we are currently in, that ends the end of June of this year. For the expenses, we're looking at July 2019 through September 2024. So that was sort of what I could sort of incorporate at the time, because there was a lot of work putting into looking at what the expenses were and aligning those with sort of the categories and program areas that we'll look at later in the presentation. And so with that, I think we can, oh, I do just want to note, these are not audited financials. These are sort of looking at the board materials that were presented over the years to indicate the budget and then our expenses that we got from our finance department, but they are in no way super precise or audited. It's really meant to give us a high level direction about where the spends have been focused to date, where the budget remaining, where those focus areas are, and then perhaps like reassign some of the funding if things have shifted over the last 5 years. Okay, could we go to the next slide, please? So there are some spent or earmarked funds that will eventually be reimbursed. And just for the simplicity of this exercise, I did not try to wrap those back in or provide a timeline, you know, in which we would see those funds come back into the local development fund. These are things like the what we call DAC GT, or the Disadvantaged Community Green Tariff, Building Efficiency Accelerator. Those are both funded reimbursement. Well, reimbursements are upfront funding from the CPUC that then we have to show our spend against those. And then there are also some expenses that were part of loans. So there was some initial capital lending for a pilot program that is no longer working, but they did install a few projects, and so that is being repaid. There is a drayage loan, which is medium heavy-duty electric vehicles that has been awarded or approved, but has yet to be issued. So I just indicated that as spent funds. And then there is the loan for the city of Piedmont's pool. It was an electrification loan of about $1 million. And so in total, we're looking at like 8 to 9 million from these funds that over time will come back, but were initially indicated as spent in this analysis, just to give us a directional idea of where we are with the local development fund. We could go to the next slide, please. So on the next slide, we are looking at when we presented to the board, we've broken things down over time in sort of a number of different ways, different programs. But in general, the way that we've talked about our efforts for the local development fund and for that team has been transportation electrification, building electrification, resilience grants, and then the other is largely like legal, marketing, sponsorships. For the most part, that is the bulk of it is legal expenses. This does not include in this representation any surplus budget allocations. We've only done that once to date, but that was not part of the initial budget. We didn't have a figure associated with it, so I didn't include it in this representation of the budget. We could go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to represent, without being overwhelming, within these categories where some of the major budget centers were. So things that are over $2 million as an individual line item. So you can read through these. You know, the big heavy hitters are our DC fast charging network called AvaCharge, of which the first is now live and available to the public. And we have another tranche of 5 sites that are under development, and then continuing development of additional sites over time. And then we have it was $10 million, which was approved for the Healthy Communities program. Right now, that is a pilot of around 2 million that has further, direct authorization. And that is the direct install of induction cooktops for in households that are CARE or FARA and have self-reported some sort of respiratory illness. And then for the resilience, the large bucket there goes to the critical municipal facilities, which is our solar and storage effort for municipal sites, And then the grants is around 7.4. But so altogether, we're looking at nearly $74 million, accounting for about 83% of the overall total budget. Some of the smaller line items that were not called out because they were less than 2 million are listed here on the right of the slide. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so, and then this is just another representation, breaking it out year over year. So the number in the total column will look identical to what we saw in the earlier slide. And you can see the number year by year at the bottom, which I present to you here because I'm going to present sort of an updated allocation in a future slide. Could we go to the next slide, please? So why are we doing this updated budget? I've already noted that we're trying to really get a high level, it's a lot of money. It was 89 million, as you can see over time. Get a high level view of, well, how much have we spent? How much do we intend to spend? Where have things shifted? And then there were some more specific examples that I've listed out here, and I'll provide a couple, specific examples, things that did not go beyond a pilot project. I mentioned block power. That was an effort that we tried to move forward with. It was very innovative and challenging. It's a very challenging market that was trying to address. And so that did not move beyond the pilot. For other things, we ended up not making it an execution priority, something like an electric living showcase, essentially like a mobile demonstration center. That was something we had intended to execute in, I think that was fiscal year 20 or 21. It ended up being in the middle of a pandemic. So doing something where you think people are going to gather and look at this, that money was shifted over to some COVID grants. Some things became irrelevant because of regulatory policy. So community solar, the efforts that we were focused in on that got rolled into a CPUC proceeding under the disadvantaged community green tariff. And now that is sort of fully consumed, but that is no longer a budget center because it is reimbursed by the PUC. Other things got shifted into other departments. So things like NEM enhancements, so additional adders. It doesn't actually, as we've learned over time, as we've developed these ideas and concepts, we then are executing often for the very first time. We continue to do that even 7 years after starting service. So when we go into execution, we realize, NEM enhancements aren't actually like a fixed budget. It ends up being a reduction in revenue. So we didn't need however much money to offer NEM enhancements. It actually comes through differently from an accounting standpoint. So there's a number of examples of things like that. But overall, this reconciliation is intended to identify and report changes between the original budget presentation to the board and our current strategy and priorities. So could we go to the next slide, please? So here is the cumulative comparison, and I'm just going to double check. Okay, because I'm looking at a different window because I have some presenters notes. So just wanted to align and make sure we were at the same place. So the cumulative comparison of the original to the updated budget, what you'll see here is, well, in resilience, you can see a very large sum of money, close to $15 million, and that represents the surplus budget allocation to the solar and storage project. So just know that's where that big slug of money came from. The other major changes, or sort of the most substantial changes, are money that was pulled from building electrification and went into grants. And on the next slide, I've listed out in detail what that sort of how these funds moved around. But essentially, we had workforce training money under building electrification. That's the way it was initially presented to the board. And our workforce and education work has really shifted into the grants category. So that was around 1.65 million, and that got shifted over to grants. So that was the bulk of that line item move. We could go to the next. Oh, and then there was also 950,000, so nearly $1 million in COVID grants that were also part of the shifting of funds between these different categories. Okay, so on the next slide, thank you, Adrian. This is details of the original to the updated budget. Again, this is just showing how funds were sort of reallocated between these categories or program areas because of changes in, as I mentioned, regulatory relevancy, or perhaps our priorities such as COVID, or just overall strategies and consolidation of concepts. Like, for example, I think we had municipal electrification as a general sort of idea presented to the board. We moved some of those funds into the critical municipal facilities. So we can go to the next slide, please. So similar to what I presented before, here is just looking at the major budget centers. Again, looking at things that are over $2 million. These budget centers now represent about 87% of the overall, and then some of the smaller items, again, I provide some examples of where that money went to. But you can see the big areas are AVA charge, the upfront solar and storage incentives, critical municipal facilities, and a little bit, I think, additional things like AVA Bike Electric. So that's $6 million from AVA's budget, matched with $4 million from AC Transit for rebates for e-bike, qualifying e-bikes, and that program will be coming out towards the middle of the summer. Okay, could we go to the next slide, please? So year over year, this is just to show, I mean, can't really, if you had the printouts, you could hold these things side by side and see that year over year, the totals match up, and that the total column on the far right is largely the same, with the exception of the big increase of funds from the budget surplus into resilience. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. So there is some of the original budget that we don't currently have sort of planned for deployment. So I'm going to show you on another slide sort of what we're calling earmarked, or sort of like planned use of funds. So we might have, you know, I forget what the number was exactly. Let's call it like $8 to $14 million for AVA Charge, our DC fast charging network. Like that money is already spoken for, but in these categories, this is money that like it's not necessarily spoken for within an existing program. So wanted to share the sort of category as well as the program area as it was presented to the board at the time. Can go to the next slide, please. And so this is now getting to the expenses. So we've spent, just over $17.5 million through September 24. So it's a little bit higher now because we're further along. But then we've earmarked over $77 million. There's details in the next slide on that. And so then you have this roughly $9.5 million that is sort of, as we're saying, it's not currently sort of programmed for deployment. And it's the two numbers that were in the previous slide, less an overage largely from legal costs in that other category. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. These are the earmarked funds, or sort of those funds that have been programmed out. They're just not yet spent. So we have the big one of 13 million for what I mentioned before, the AVA Charge, the DC fast charging network. We have the $10 million for Healthy Communities, which is currently just a pilot. We have the nearly 15 million for the upfront solar and storage incentives. And again, that is for sort of your standard residential customer, and then an increased incentive for care and fairer income qualified customers. And that also that includes the incentives for the resilience hubs. So these are the earmarked funds totaling that $77 million. And a bit on the status. So if we go to the last slide here, so between now with this presentation, which is just informational for the board, and May, we'll be working on, our budget proposals internally as staff. And so we will be looking at the funding for the local development work in light of this reconciliation or analysis. And as part of that budget drafting process, we'll bring forward a proposal to the board about what to do with that $9.5 million in the next budget cycle. And then we will be bringing back as well sort of longer term strategic planning that we've been actively discussing as internal staff and teams, looking at both what we are executing now, what we're going to be executing on in the next 6 months, and then what that's going to look like, sort of looking further forward, and really sort of that key period is like 2027 through 2030, because we are in the process of launching programs right now that have a 2 to 3 year program cycle. So there is lots of work going on to get those stood up, and then there will be a lot of work to keep them going and make adjustments as necessary based on the results that we see. And with that, I am done my presentation.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll take member comments, questions, or concerns. Jim?
Yeah, excuse me. Annie, how much is, just for scale, how much of this is set? Does this compare to AVA's overall budget? What's AVA's overall budget? So
AVA's overall budget for the next budget cycle will be over $1 billion.
So we're talking about a pretty small amount of it.
Yeah, I think 98% of our budget is the cost of power and the other products associated with power, like resource adequacy.
Right. And that leads to my next question. How many of these programs or efforts actually provide some sort of power or power management or energy, the auxiliary services to how much are we
Ava,
offsetting this? I mean, it's probably sort of on scale of the ratio of the budgets, but you know, is anybody tracking that?
Yeah, we are working on different projects that can aggregate some of the resources. So our virtual power plant work for both the solar and storage incentive as well as the managed charging program that's going to be launching, as well as CMF, are all working to bring in some of these distributed resources towards the commodity products, but it is de minimis at this point in time compared to the amount of energy and resource adequacy that the agency buys for all of our customers.
Right. But hopefully it's bigger than the portion of the budget that overall budget that we're spending on the local development. Are we getting our money's worth from local development is what I'm trying to push at.
I'm hearing two separate questions. One is what's the energy kind of value delivered from local development? Right. And the second is an efficacy question around what are we getting from local development? So are you,
no, if you put the energy management, the bulk energy services, the distributed energy resources, what's the value of that? Not in terms of those energy resources.
It's very small because the amount of power, energy and capacity and resource adequacy that we buy is very large. And getting these resources to respond in a useful, reliable, contractable way is a huge challenge. I mean, our resilient home program is 1.3 megawatts, of load modification. It's contracted deliveries for, residential, over 1,000 residential home systems. And that's a contract that we continue to negotiate with the vendor as we try to make sure that it's usable.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a very immature space when we try to make these resources look like standard utility scale energy commodities.
Right. I understand that. I just want to put that goal in front of us and say, let's work to that, because those will be local resources.
Yeah, we have a
And-
$2 million VPP budget with Lunar. We have a $2 million managed charging program through Lunar and a different vendor. And we have, and we are trying to make sure that the $14 million solar and storage incentive delivers some commodity value. So
Yeah.
there's almost $20 million worth of virtual power plant work there within the budget that Annie has just proposed.
And that's the size of the energy side of it, not the amount.
That's just the size of the programs that, and the allocated budget. Yeah, that's not we can't right now say that's the value of the commodity offset. That's a different calculation.
Maybe just to add in there, I think, I believe, Jim, what you're getting at is virtual power plants, which is a concept that is much discussed, but actual execution of those types of programs is far less than the amount of airspace they're taking up. And what we're trying to do is lay out the foundation so that we have lessons learned, because we're finding, through the Resilient Home program that JP mentioned, like even though it's relatively small, we've learned a lot from it, so that in time, we can scale these programs and know that we have a reliable asset that we can call upon that will in fact be reliable both from a financial perspective for AVA, but also as like grid reliability for California, because we need to be able to control and manage the load and the demand.
Okay. I just wanted to bring our focus, add that to the discussion to make sure that that's a longer term goal and, not get too worried about shifting, tracking what programs changed, to keep the larger goal in mind, keep it in perspective, and hope to grow how much you're doing, a lot.
It's a big organizational focus on virtual power plants, for sure.
Other comments or questions? Cynthia?
Yeah, I want to thank Annie for this very comprehensive, detailed report. When you decide on the how the 9.5 million is to be allocated, could we have a further report back to this to the CAC?
Yeah, I anticipate that'll be part of the standard budget cycle, which begins internally for us really right now, but is presented, at various subcommittees and then to the full board in May for review and feedback, and then again in June for approval. So it will, at a minimum, be part of that May and June board review.
Will it come here also to the CAC?
As determined by the chair, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Like to make a request.
Thank you, Annie. I'm just not seeing any other hands raised online or here, but I think in regards to, and thank you for this report. It's very great to see the process and the program. But the $9.5 million funds that are out there, and staff will bring a proposal, but is there an opportunity for the CAC or an ad hoc committee of the CAC to maybe discuss options with staff to really see what might be something of interest? I mean, we have two ad hoc committees, one looking at energy and one looking at the local development business plan, and just be nice to be able to get feedback through the ad hocs, maybe support staff or help staff work through some ideas, and to then maybe be vetted in the subcommittees, and then eventually to the CAC here that we could recommend and be aligned with, and then bring that to the board to further support. So I just want to bring that as maybe a suggestion for staff to consider, like, what are you discussing? Can one of the ad hoc committees here support or vet it out with you? and then, clarify and then bake it up, and that'd be a better tasting pie, as they would say.
I think we welcome any suggestions that the CAC ad hoc committee has.
Perfect, thank you. How does that look for CAC? Anybody, one of the chairs want to lead a conversation?
Well, it's local business development, what Jim has been doing.
Would you want to sort of engage with staff to just look at some of the ideas or that are being discussed?
Yeah, maybe I should talk to Annie and JP offline on what are the key topics you guys are putting forward and take it to the ad hoc committee and we can chew on it a bit and bring it to the CAC or clarify questions, bring up ideas to.
So you can give us 2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
All right. That's great. Thank you. Yes, sir. May I help you? Public comment. Yes, we will take public comment. Or just go loud if you want from there. Whatever.
I pulled my knee skiing, so standing up is not great.
Yeah, then
I
just roll
don't
over.
recommend skiing, that's the complete.
You wanna just, come on over here.
Thank you, JP.
Join us at the party.
Appreciate it. No, and thank you, Annie, for a really informative presentation. I think we just wanted to, LCA really just wanted to highlight that there has been continuous advocacy for increased investments in resilience, but in resilience programs that the community would really benefit from, and that could be microgrids, islandable solar, solar and storage battery, and that has been continued advocacy by LCEA for years and since I came on about a year ago. And there is a lot of frustration and disappointment on the part of a lot of community members that that has not been something that has been reflected in either the surplus budget or the budget itself, or even this sort of these funds that were left over. And so we wanted to continue to advocate that in, as we talked about, AVA's budget is $1 billion. This is somewhat, I don't want to call it chump change, but it is chump change in terms of just the leviathan of the amount of money that we're talking about. And that is money that for communities could be life-changing when it comes to energy resilience, when it comes to climate resilience and being able to face power outages and wildfires. And so really wanted to press that this funding could be going toward more community-oriented resilience work, and that that should be something that is reflected in future budgets, future surpluses, future reconciliations. And that is those are my words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please use the hand raise feature if you'd like to give public comment from a remote location. There are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Bring it back to the table. Cynthia, comment? Anything else?
No, I think.
Good. All right, great. Thank you very much, Annie, for that. And I see you have a guest joining us this evening.
Oh,
So
how
please, thank you very
pretty.
much. Great work, both of you. Thank you. We'll see you Wednesday. Bring your
All
friend.
right, thank you.
Bring your friends.
All right, thank you. And with that, we'll jump over to, I believe, item C7, the ad hoc committee update. If anything is there that the chairs want to report out or members of the committees?
For the Energy Affordability Ad Hoc Committee, we had a meeting on March 12th, and we had very good discussions and just sort of, I think the recommendations, we're at a point where we have a PowerPoint presentation. Mickey's been really good at putting it together, and we've been sort of commenting, but we're not quite done. But I think by the next meeting, we could present our presentation. But our recommendations, there were 4 of them. One is that we wanted to recommend that the AVA board do a better job of advocating for clean energy and lower costs. And the second one was that the CAC would like to advocate for clean energy and lower costs with the board of directors and our own cities. The third one was that we really enjoy or would like a explanation from the AVA staff about PG&E costs for generation and transmission, sort of more transparency around that piece. And we'd like AVA to support the cities and provide purchasing abilities, like municipal utility districts and, provide purchasing opportunities that AVA be a good to buy electricity and develop programs. So more of that information. And Jim and Peter, if you want to add anything to that? Did I leave anything out? No? Okay. So that's sort of a, those are,
And public comment, just to flow with that comment.
okay. Yeah, and Mickey has probably more to say, yeah.
We'll grab her in a second.
Sure.
Public comment, just to keep the format. Do we want to jump to Jim?
We spent a lot of time discussing how to bring in information from the community, ideas, going back to people who've been active in developing the original LDBP ideas. So there was a lot of that. We don't have anything yet to report on that.
What are some of the ideas that you're working through and thinking since?
It's more of who to talk to find out what's still important to them. And so hearing from Annie and JP what they're thinking of will help when we start talking to people about that. And that's about it. Oh, we got a short visit from a baby goat.
Oh.
Were you outside or something, or they came to a coffee or?
One of Vice Chair Souza's goats popped in for a minute.
Lovely. With that, we can maybe go to public comment, maybe we'll take the Vice Chair's comments. That's okay, unless the other hands raised, I see none, so we can.
Yes. Vice Chair Souza, recognized for 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you guys for so articulately voicing. As far as the local business development plan, I do think that the last presentation kind of got me a little excited about inviting local clean power, and just as Jim said, some of the other entities that were in the past, or perhaps even a new blood to voice opinions on perhaps adding enhancing the local business development plan. We don't want to let that opportunity go away, and so that's very exciting. I'm sure we're gonna have more to say. I think Peter has a lot to say as well. And as far as the ad hoc for the energy affordability, I think it's just it makes my stomach turn to see how much transmission and distribution costs are, and why. I think we really need to know why they are so high. It's almost like Ava Community Energy is the tail wagging the dog, because the cost of the generation is nowhere near what our customers are being charged through PG&E. And so I think that needs to be really dug away and exposed. So I think that'll be more to say about that next meeting. Sorry I couldn't make it. I just really didn't feel well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. No other items on the ad hoc committee. Thank you very much for meeting and discussing these ideas so we can further our role as a CAC and our placement with the board and the overall organization, partnering with staff, understanding the tension that may or may not be there, but working also with community to move us forward in the right direction, a clean future, and renewable energy with good paying jobs. With that, any other member or staff announcements or items that you want to place on the agenda for next month?
Well,
Jim, is our next ad hoc meeting April 2nd for the,
Yes, you're right.
that's right, for our local.
The local development ad
Yes.
hoc, yes.
Perhaps, after hearing what Mickey had to say, perhaps we should ask, for a staff update on the transmission and distribution costs before we do our presentation. Maybe next month, could we have that?
Well, could the affordability ad hoc do that? Prepare it for the CAC.
You want us to do that? Thank you. Wait, what did you, I didn't understand what you said, Jim, sorry. So that was gonna be one of our recommendations.
Oh, right.
Was that we understood more what the transportation and distribution costs that PG&E incurs. And that might feed into our recommendations. That was gonna be our recommendation, but I'm wondering if that would help. I guess I'm asking, do you think the order would be okay? To put that on the agenda next time, before we did our presentation, we could do that the following month.
I just want to clarify, I know they had the rate setting methodology last month at the board of directors, talked about the generation rates, delivery charges, the power charge, the PCIA, and how we index. Is that something we should revisit here? We didn't have it here, did we, that presentation, or no? No, we didn't, right? So you think that would help? I mean, I'm just looking at stuff, I'm just trying to understand if that would help maybe bringing that presentation here and then be able to dive into some questions, because it was informational last month. Unless we just went back.
Is that at the board? That
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
for
the
us.
board, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
So I don't know if you want to look at it again, or maybe have some homework, review it through the ad hoc.
Yeah, maybe we could review it.
So I think that's a good
Okay.
place to review that presentation, and then follow up with Adrian with maybe any other clarifying questions, or Kate too, because I think you're the liaison, I believe. Clarify, correct me if I'm wrong. And then you want to revise your presentation, work with them, but our next meeting won't be till April 14th.
Okay.
So maybe you have some time to look at that presentation with the ad hoc. It goes a good context primer on how things are set up.
That
And
would
then
be helpful, I
deeper
think.
dive questions can maybe come back.
Mhm.
Your ad hoc, with Kate, the staff, and then see what you found out and help us.
Yeah,
listened
I
to
think
it,
so.
but it was very like,
Yeah.
I was there.
It's dense, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot.
But I think the expectation of what we're going to present is sort of like the different things we've discussed and found out, and then what our recommendations are. So it's going to be sort of a tour through our conversations and what we've learned.
Great. So do we need to add them to the agenda, or you think you'll take it offline and
Um,
review the presentation with your ad hoc and then engage Kate for assistance?
Yeah, I think we should take it offline and then maybe the May meeting.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. Other comments, questions, concerns? Yeah, one from where? Vice Chair Souza. Vice Chair Souza, public comment, yes, Jim?
When is the CCA statewide meeting, and do we want to send a representative from the CAC there?
I think this, from my understanding, maybe you can clarify, I think that would, or somebody else, anybody, I believe, I don't know. JP, can you clarify, because I don't think that AVA covers any CAC members, only board members.
Yeah, AVA doesn't cover CAC members, but it's a conference that anyone is allowed to buy a pass for.
Oh, you can.
You can go, but it has to be on your own expense, I believe, that's what I'm hearing. Unless you're a board member, I mean, we can recommend that they get somebody from
Yeah.
we can recommend to the board and see if the board support to pay for a CAC
I think we
representative to go to a Cal conference, and then
If
that would
someone's-
work with the board direction.
Yeah.
Right? No a change in policy,
You're free to make that recommendation.
got it. Would you like me to carry that forward?
Yeah,
I think
I think
so,
so. I think
yeah.
it'd be good. We could
Okay.
vote somebody to go.
Okay, we'll have one representative there from the CAC. It's still applicable to the board. Okay, I'll do that.
Is it going backwards if I have a question about the CCA General Conference wasn't there a conference pretty recently that the CCAs got together?
The national.
The national,
conference?
was SB 540 mentioned there, discussed? No,
And that was more national, so it
might not.
but I'm not sure.
And just to clarify in this recommendation, would you want to just have, what would you request the board to support? Similar to that of the board members?
Yeah, I think to Yeah, and maybe not this year, but next year we could present something about CAC since we're unusual. I mean, I don't know if that's of interest since we're
to
the
the
only
other
CCA with a
CCAs.
CAC.
Okay.
That would be, and maybe that could be next year. We could do a presentation at the same time. We can make that in the recommendation. So then the board's getting some benefit of having a CAC person go.
Vice Chair Souza.
Vice Chair Souza, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I really do think that we did have, we were talking a minute ago about the presentation that was given by some of the AVA community staff about our bill. It's not really AVA Community Energy. It's not in their jurisdiction. I think it's in PG&E's, and unless we get them to discuss exactly what they're doing with all of these distribution charges, I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of it. You know, I am a consumer. I want to know, you know, I go to the store, I want to know what I'm buying. And I think it's absolutely immoral and illegal that they're just charging us these large amounts of money and pasting it all with wildfire prevention. So I really think that somehow we need to get down to the nitty gritty on what's going on with these distribution charges. Somebody, I mean, I don't know if we need to build a coalition or we get some angry homeowners together and they write a petition saying, I want to see where this money is going. You know, it seems to be going down the drain. But anyway, that's my opinion on, you know, hearing another, you know, conversation or a presentation on the PG&E bill or our utility bill. It's not AVA, it's PG&E. Thank you.
Thank you.
So based on her comment, can we add to the request that instead of, well, we still will review the presentation of AVA's, but could we have someone from PG&E talk to us about that? Is that a thing that PG&E does?
There's really the liaison, political affairs liaison, but I don't know the relationship that AVA has with PG&E as regards to spokespeople or any kind of questions to this body. There is none, is there?
Maybe from the CPUC.
That'd be good.
I mean, there are ratepayer advocate groups. There's the ratepayer advocate that's within the PUC. There's the Utility Reform Network, TURN. There are traditional ratepayer advocate groups who have been, you know, organizing and filing on this for decades. So there are forums for that if this body wants to engage with something like that. That's probably the place to go. Our PG&E contact is not going to be able to speak to this for the CAC.
Can we flow some of those contact resources over to your committee? So
That would
we
be
can have
great.
Conversations
We'll
about that?
yeah.
I think I can,
Okay. So it
I
sounds
can
like we,
get connections too.
so we may not be May, maybe June.
It's, you know, it takes a while to make that pile inside, so we make it happen.
Okay.
All right, good. Well, thank you for letting us help us with the discovery here. Anything else before we adjourn to the next time? Seeing none, we're adjourned 8:13 p.m.
Whoa.
That's all right. Now, where's my friend? Okay. Yeah, we're adjourned till April 14th, 2025 here, 6 p.m. Great space. I love it. Thank you for letting me share your space. Love it. Thank you very much. Great meeting you.
Pretty good.
All right. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
You did a good job. I sort of wondered, yes, you did.